Hello and welcome back to McKinley. Today I'm going to talk to you about the design and construction of the Wakefield Yard. The yard is based on the Halifax line, which comes out of Sheffield, goes through Wakefield and then arrives at Halifax. On the layout, it's quite steeply graded. There's a heavy gradient on that track. On the real life prototypical concept we wanted to use, it was a secondary line, quite heavily graded, short train lengths. So in McKinley terms, that would be 4 or 5 triplets, which is 12 to 15 wagons. For Wakefield, what I wanted was to have something like the mail order houses that used to exist when I was a kid. There were lots of them, like Littlewoods, Great Universal. There were dozens of these entities. Every home had one of their catalogues and people would order things from it. They would fill it all out, send it off in a letter together with a cheque or even with a credit request. And a few weeks later, whether it was bikes, suits, shirts, ironing boards, the whole lot, it would all be delivered. And these companies, their whole existence from the 1930s through to the 1970s was predominantly shipping this stuff by rail. From McKinley's perspective, the real key about that is that if we have a yard in Wakefield that's shipping from one entity, wagons, or rather vans, out to all the other stations on the layout, it makes use of Sheffield, i.e. stuff will go to London and Birmingham and Manchester. So it's a great design from that perspective. The other thing I had wanted to have was lots of additional secondary goods sheds and cement sidings and things like that. But when we went through the design process as the team, we found there just wasn't really enough space. And why didn't we just concentrate on making it a single purpose yard? And that's been a fantastic journey. So I'm going to hand over to the rest of the team now to take you through some of the finer detail.
Well, what's unique about Wakefield? Well, Wakefield is going to have some frenetic activity followed by periods of relative calm. In reality, Wakefield is a shunting puzzle. Wakefield is about Aubrey's, and Aubrey's is a substantial mail order business. In Wakefield Yard, there are a number of facilities. There are 4 loading and unloading roads. There are 4 storage roads in the upper yard. There's a packaging arrival yard. There are 2 arrival departure roads. There's 1 main loop and some subsidiary loops. There's a rip track. Just let me explain what a rip track is. A rip track is where wagons are placed that are in need of some maintenance, some low-level maintenance. RIP stands for repair in place. It's an American term, but it's a facility that will be useful here. There's a brake van road. There are minimal locomotive servicing facilities restricted to watering, restricted to oiling, and also restricted in capacity to 2 locomotives. So Aubrey's has lots of facilities. So there are no challenges. Well, that's not quite the case. What we envisage is a close sequence of 6 trains of ostensibly full vans coming to restock the Aubrey facility. These must be unloaded before they can be then reloaded to be dispatched to their eventual destination. But because of only having 2 arrival departure tracks, the first arriving trains will need to be cleared very quickly to make space for the next arriving trains, and so on until all 6 trains have arrived. So 2 trains can be parked in Aubrey's, 2 trains can be parked in the upper yard, and 2 trains to depart as empty vans. Well, that's quite straightforward, isn't it? But to make it's just a teeny weeny bit more interesting. We're also going to have 2 trains of parcel vans, so that's passenger rated stock arriving, and they will be destined for both London and Manchester. It's a bit crowded now in Albury's, so 4 locomotives will have to be dispatched light engine as a brigade back to Sheffield Yard for their servicing. Let me explain what a brigade is. A brigade is where we will be able to send 4 locomotives, but not as a consist. Train controller will do the work of the consist for us. So they will leave the yard appearing to be a train. They're actually 4 individual locomotives, but they will all go off at the same speed and work together quite happily. So, what are the tasks for the operators? Well, although the yard is a bit crowded, all they've really got to do is move the vans about so that they can be unloaded. This will need them to move unloaded vans past full vans. Vans will stay in Albury's for a time specified, for a specified time, and then be moved past the next lot of vans coming in and up to the upper yard. You'll see from the track that the operators are going to have to think about how they move one set of vans past another set of vans. There is space, but it needs thinking about so that you don't get empty vans and full vans on the same track and unable to pass each other. They will have to receive the empty passenger rated stock and get that into Albury's quickly. Passenger rated stock will be longer vehicles than vans. That might cause them to think a little bit. The 2 locomotives remaining in the yard will need to be moved to the servicing facility so that they can be watered and oiled. The operators will have to be prepared to receive the 2 train locomotives for the departing parcels train. These will be probably class 5 locomotives as they are going longer distances, so will be different. They'll have to dispatch the parcels train on time or risk losing its slot, in which case it remains in the yard and will cause more difficulties. They'll have to move empty vans to be loaded in Albury's and get them back up to the upper yard so that they will be ready for their dispatch at their allotted time. The time that the vans remain at Albury's will be timed so that there can be no cheating. If an operator should decide to move a van out of Albury's before its allotted time, it will be seen as unloaded, and that will appear on the database and the van will not be allowed to go. The operators will have to move full vans down to the dispatch road and attach a brake van so this is ready for their allotted departure time. And again, if the departure time isn't met, well, I'm afraid the train can't go. The engines that remain at Albury's will have to be attached to the train. And as I've just said, if the trains are late, it will lose its path and will be held in the yard, which means when the next sequence of 6 arriving trains come will mean that there are already vans in the road. There are also some wild cards in there because all this could become a little bit repetitive, and the operators may need just a little bit of variety. So there is the potential for variable times that vans are held in Albury's. Some could be held there for a short time, some could be held for a longer time. There could be the need to break out from an already assembled train, wagons needing to be placed in the RIT tracks. And then there's the one thing I haven't mentioned, and that is the packaging road. Aubrey's will use an awful lot of packaging. Any of us who've had anything from Amazon will know the size of boxes we get. Probably in these days it was brown paper and straw, but all that material will need to arrive at Aubrey's. And there will be a yard specifically for the arrival of packaging material. Just when those trains arrive is not predetermined, but they will come. So that is Wakefield. I hope our operators will enjoy the uniqueness of the yard, and that they will have had fun and feel that they've been challenged and want to come back again and enjoy the opportunities that it represents.
So let's have a look at some of the typical train movements that we might expect in Wakefield. Trains will come up from Sheffield on a lower level and be broadly unseen, and will come up under the Halifax boards, which are behind Wakefield, through a cutting, because we like at McKinley to see trains in action in the background and then disappear again, round to the end, the right hand side of the board as the operators look at them. They diverge from the double track main line at this point, where my pen is, and will pull into the one of the two arrival departure tracks here, right in the centre of the Wakefield board. Wakefield has two operators, and their roles are split broadly between controlling the left-hand end of the layout, which is from here to there, and the right-hand end of the layout, which is from here over to behind Albury's distribution. And we'll come back to their roles in just a moment. I mentioned the fact that there are two arrival departure tracks, so we have room for a secondary train to come in behind them and come into the secondary track. If we need to take a third train in, we do have extra capacity below the station on the outer side of the board on the line which runs up to the 4 storage tracks. So we have capacity for 3 simultaneously or near simultaneously arriving trains, and that is important at certain times of the day or night because traffic flow in and out is not always consistent, as we know. The typical movement at that point would be for the arriving loco to pull off to the front or left into the loco release track, which leaves a train of up to about 6 triplets or 18 wagons, but more likely to be 4 or 12 individual cars, which would then be pushed from one of the 2 yard switches from behind up to one of the 4 wagon storage tracks on the extreme left of the layout. And it's very important that those are still operated from the front because we have no human access round to the left hand side of the layout. Otherwise these Wakefield operators will get in the way of the Sheffield operators. We do try and maintain that real estate. The brake van, which is the back, would also then be pushed into a brake van storage track, which is down here on the extreme left hand side of the layout. Individual trains can then be stored for as long as necessary in one of those 4 tracks in what we call the upper yard to the left hand side. But trains can also be broken up in the main classification or manipulation area for the one purpose that anything goes to Wakefield, which is to service in and out the Albury's distribution centre, which is this very large building down on the bottom right hand side of the layout. The Albury's distribution centre has 4 distinct tracks, and they individually would hold either 3 triplets or 2 triplets. So there's quite a lot of flexibility there, but they will not take an entire train, so there is work for the Albury's operator to do. And I say the Albury's operator, one of the 2 operators will control the front and right hand side of the yard, and the other, perhaps senior operator, will control the centre arrivals, departures and the wagon storage tracks at the left-hand side of the yard, but they have to work together for peak efficiency. And at some times of the day and night, this yard will be a very, very busy place. So let's consider what happens to a typical train when it comes in. It will have come up from Sheffield, as already described, and it will have arrived in one of these two main arrival departure tracks, which are from the front, as the operator sees it, the third and fourth tracks from the front. A train will come in, the locomotive will be on the front, and there'll be up to 6 triplet or freight sets behind it, probably more likely 4, and invariably a brake van on the end. The locomotive will pull off at the front and go into the loco release track here. The yard shunter will come in from the right-hand side. This lives over here when out of use. We'll pull the brake van off the back and use this right-hand ladder to push the brake van through to a brake van storage track down here at the bottom left-hand side. And the yard shunter will then, having got itself around to the left-hand side, the former front of the train, will, if it can, or if the operator can, if space allows in the distribution centre, will then start to push these sets of wagons in, out, to fill up the tracks in Albury's so that the wagons are ready for loading for the next consignment of goods out. And that might take quite a bit of time, actually, usually a little longer than you think. There is a packaging arrivals track down here, this secondary building at the bottom, and that is because when you have a distribution centre, inevitably a lot of packaging is used. We get an awful lot of packaging through our doors nowadays, and it wasn't much different in the 1950s and 60s. The Amazon of its day, as David has described it before. So a lot of goods in, coming into packaging or materials coming in, and a lot of finished goods from the distribution centre. Anything you like to name, it was from the catalogues. They would be loaded up, ready for departing trains. When the wagons are ready for, at least for initial departure, or ideally, if capacity is available, or potentially storage if not, they get pulled out in a reverse sequence back into the arrival or now departure tracks. The locomotive will the road locomotive, the main pulling locomotive, will come back from its storage track down on the right-hand end, be coupled onto the front. The brake van will be retrieved by the yard shunter and pushed onto the back, and the train then is ready for departure back onto the main, where it's picked up by train controller and taken back to Sheffield. One note on the locomotives. You may have noticed that there's no turning facility here. We didn't have room for a turntable. We thought about it and we looked at it, but we just didn't have room. So locomotives, steam locomotives certainly will be running backwards back to Sheffield. It's just something of a quirk. And if we have too much of a build-up of locomotives here, for example, several empty trains have come in the morning rush, we have almost no loco storage facility here, just one track, watering only, no servicing. We do have the facility to run what is known as a brigade of locos, light or dry, back to Sheffield. They could be returned in the same numbers later in the day when the goods are ready to depart at heavier departure times. That is how Wakefield works in theory. We've tested it in practice pretty successfully. 2 operators. It will be a very different single industry focus yard, quite unlike anything we've had at McKinley before.
So there you have the journey we've made to date on Wakefield, both the design and the initial part of the construction. It's been a great collaborative journey with a lot of friends, really enjoyable, and I'm very grateful for all the help they've given me in getting this enterprise, if we can call McKinley Railway that, to where we got it today. We'll be publishing more videos soon. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. Stay tuned, see you soon, take care, goodbye.